Why have we come to earth? Do you remember? Why have we taken birth? Do you remember?
Yes, I'm free. Chris and Diana Johnson, also known as Intuit, or collectively known as Intuit. They're also collectively known as Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, too, so. There is that. We've had all this wonderful youthful energy, and it's kind of gotten us a little bit discombobulated from a couple of things. So one thing that Sue asked me to remember is that if you're new here, if you're here for the first time and you did not get one of our newcomer packets, could you raise your hand and we'll be happy to bring you one. Anybody right here? Great, right back there. That next to last row back there. All right. There's chocolate in them in case I get boring. There's chocolate. I learned that a long time ago. If the minister is boring, you can at least you have chocolate and you have a good experience. So we've been working, and we will continue to work for this whole year on the topic of creating a world that works for all. And so we're going to today explore the idea of living in alignment with truth. And it's funny because there's a little typo on the internal paperwork here that says living in alightment with truth. And I thought, there's no accidents, are there? And Charlie mentioned that. There's no accidents in that process. We listened to Dawn talking about how the light came on in her life, by being in here. And a lot of us have either had that light come on or we're looking for that light to come on in our lives. So that's what we're working with, is living in alignment with truth, capital T, truth. The quote that we're going with today, which is from the Global Heart Vision for the organization, the whole organization. And those who are new, we are part of a whole global, literally worldwide organization known as Centers for Spiritual Living. And this year, more than 100 of our churches are focusing on this particular theme of creating a world that works for all. So we're shifting consciousness collectively as much as we can to start to create that as a process, to start to create that as a vision and an idea for us to manifest. So our quote is, we see a world in which people live in alignment with their highest spiritual truth. And so it's important to, first of all, know what is highest spiritual truth. Reverend Sue and Charlie on Friday night presented a wonderful presentation on their experience at the World Parliament of Religions, which was held last October, right, in Salt Lake City, Utah. 80 religions from around the world, over 10,000, almost 11,000 people attending this, and a collective global breaking through some of the barriers. And how can we work together? How can we live in alignment? How can we say, what is the core among all of us? We have all these different processes and procedures, but what are the core spiritual truths? What are we really about? And how can we work in harmony? Isn't that a great thing? Yeah. And so the highest spiritual truth, as far as we can know, is that there is a source, something greater than us. Are we good with that? Yep. You probably have noticed that. If you haven't noticed it, trust me, there is something greater than just me. There's one infinite source. The nature of that source is pure love. If we have love in existence anywhere, then it must be the nature of that source. If the source was not love, love wouldn't exist, would it? If the source wasn't joy, joy wouldn't exist. If the source wasn't beauty, beauty wouldn't exist. If the source wasn't intelligence, intelligence wouldn't exist. So we live in a universe that is a universe of joy, it is a universe of love, it is the universe of beauty, that is the universe of intelligence, divine intelligence. It's infinite in its abundance. Have you ever looked in the sky at night? Particularly if you've gotten out a little ways away from the city lights. You kind of notice there's a couple of stars up there. You know, and there's a couple of grains of sand on the beaches, and a couple of trees around, and a couple of people too. I mean, the human race is evidence of the abundance of Spirit. What Spirit creates in any way, it creates in infinitude. So if there's love anywhere, it's an infinity of love. If there's joy anywhere, it's an infinity of joy. And so there's an infinity of abundance of good, of all the life energy that we need, present completely to all. This one expresses itself in multiplicity. Again, have you noticed? We're not all the same. Dang, you know? That was a joke. Think of we just watched The Matrix the other day, the Matrix Reloaded, where Agent Smith keeps duplicating himself, okay, over and over and over again. Think of 7 billion of just me or just you on the planet. Okay? Diversity is the nature of Spirit. Diversity is the divine nature. Our uniqueness, who we each are, is an expression of that infinite presence, of that infinite oneness. We are here because the universe took the time and the thought and the energy to be each of us. It is taking, right now, it is taking the time, thought, and energy to be you. Breathe that in. If it wasn't, you wouldn't exist. Okay. So you're important to the nature of the universe. You're important to the existence of the universe. Out of this diversity, while this diversity is existing simultaneously, there's an underlying oneness and unity. So all is a oneness expressing in multiplicity. So we need everybody. We need everybody. The aging and the youth. And all other sorts of what we use for divisions, we need all those divisions. And this infinite principle, or this infinite presence, operates through principle. It operates through law. It operates through a process. And the primary law that it operates through is cause and effect. I love the song that these guys sang. You know, you mean it's up to me to create my reality? Yes, it is. That's the law of cause and effect. And that law is present everywhere we look, and it's expressed in all of the spiritual teachings and in science itself. As I reap, so shall I sow. If I plant corn, what do I expect to grow? Right. I don't get tomatoes if I plant corn, right? Okay. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. What you put out is what comes back to you. All that is the law of cause and effect. What I'm putting into the world, what I'm putting into my life, is what's going to come back to me. That's the law of cause and effect. So this is the underlying spiritual truth that we are here seeking to apply. Now, there's a difference between knowing that truth, or knowing about that truth, and living that truth. Because living means we practice it, we apply it. And therein lies the rub, huh? Because we sometimes forget about it. I'll speak for myself. I sometimes forget about it. And I try to apply different things. And there's that old wonderful song, I fought the law, and the law won. Always does. Ernest Holmes says we approach love through law. And what that simply means is we need to be in alignment with how the universe is working in order to experience the love of the universe. When we're out of alignment with it, it feels like it's not loving. Thomas Troward, who I'm teaching a class on right now, talks about that if we're running counter to spirit, it feels like spirit is running backwards. It feels like spirit is running the negative. Okay? But the real truth is, I'm the one who's running counter to spirit. You ever have that, where you think you're going the right way? You ever turn down a one-way street that's going the other way? You don't have too many of those here in Reading, but I know in other cities that I've lived in, it's like once in a big while I've turned down that, and it's like, what are all these people doing going the wrong way? Oh, wait. Maybe it's not them. So when I'm running counter to the universe, it feels like the universe is running counter to me. And many of us have had that experience. Don talked about, an experience of that, very passionately. When we open to giving and receiving greater love, when we move into alignment with the law, we open to that. We are giving, receiving, we're in that giving, receiving cycle. So there's a young man who asked Jesus how to follow him. And the first thing Jesus says is, follow the laws. Honor your father and mother, do all that stuff. That's the first thing that we all have to do. We have to master the law first before we can start to get creative with it. He later on gave the guy another piece of teaching that the guy couldn't handle. Okay? But he started off by saying, follow the laws. Are we in alignment with law? And we're not ready for more until we move into alignment with law. If we're working in the field of music, we have to understand how music works, right? And if we're working in the field of painting, right now Shari Wyndham is teaching a wonderful class in watercolor. And the first thing you have to understand is, how does the paint and the water and the paper work? And then you have to understand, how does composition work? And how does color relating work? And all that stuff. You have to understand how it works before you can go off and to start to expand and create and have your own style. If you're working with electricity, how many of you would hire an electrician who doesn't understand the law of electricity to wire your house? I'm not seeing a lot of hands. Okay, good. We have wise people here. So we have to understand the laws. We have to learn the laws, and we have to apply them. How many of you would hire an electrician who knows the laws of electricity but doesn't apply them? You wouldn't do that either, right? Okay, I would. We teach this process of prayer here called 5-step treatment, spiritual mind treatment. And people sometimes resist that. Well, it feels mechanical. It feels, I have to learn these steps, and it feels kind of awkward. And if you're used to the getting down on your knees and praying, "Dear Jesus, help me," it is awkward. It's a different kind of prayer coming from a completely different consciousness. But it's designed to provide a guide, or to be a process for a guide that moves us into a deeper conception and connection with ourselves and our deeper inner spirit. And as we learn the process, as we learn the steps, we feel that connection more deeply. Right? Yes. For those of you who play with treatment, apply treatment a lot, I love it. Whenever I get off base, that's the first place I go. And sometimes when I'm on base, it's the first place I go, because as Ernest says, we should be praying ceaselessly, or Paul said that originally, and Ernest said we should be the most praying people on the planet, because we have a process for doing that that's not about beseeching somebody up there. So the kind of thinking that created our current world will not take us to where we want to go in our next level of evolution. Okay, think about that for a moment. Chord put it this way. He says, if we contemplate or believe in a law of not enough, that becomes the law of our being. This is the reading that we had. Spirit creates by self-contemplation, therefore what it contemplates itself as being, that it becomes. Each of us is individualized spirit, therefore what we contemplate ourselves as being, we become. So if I'm contemplating lack, if I'm contemplating sickness, if I really believe that when I watch TV and they say it's flu season, what is my experience? Right. Here's one that'll challenge you. If you believe in aging, okay. If we contemplate a law of separation or competition, we have the experience of being separate and constantly in competition with other people. If we contemplate the law of powerlessness, who am I? I'm just little old me. I can't do anything. If we believe that, then we have the experience of powerlessness. And we don't even bother. So we believe and act as if we have no power, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where we believe that. Now, we have to master each of the levels of life in order to move on to the next. Okay? So what works at one level of life doesn't work at the next level of life. But worked when we were children. Doesn't work anymore. I talked about in the first service, I talked about that when I first started into this path, I first began to have to learn how to be a religious science. What's this teaching about? So I took classes. I took what are called core classes. What is this teaching about? Get familiar with it. After a while, I said, I'd like to step forward and be more. I'd like to be what they call a practitioner. And so I had to take 2 more years of classes in order to be a practitioner. Eventually, I got called and nudged into being a minister. And so I had to take classes in being a minister. Now, what works in the classes of being a minister doesn't work in the practice of being a minister. I wish it was divided up into each quarter and I would just get an A on the test and I would be done. Somebody was discussing with me the other day of well, David, you're just here to get the, you should work until you get the job done. And I said, when is the job done? Okay? And so I come out of ministerial school and move into, being the staff minister and then senior minister of another church and then senior minister here. And I more and more learned that I know nothing about being a minister. Okay? So what works at that level of existence doesn't work at the next level of existence. We talk oftentimes about there are 4 kingdoms of consciousness. The first kingdom of consciousness is that life happens to me. It's called victim consciousness. Okay, I'm just an oyster or a clam at the bottom of the ocean and it's just dumping on me. And whatever, if it dumps food on me, I've got food, and if it doesn't, I don't. Life is just happening to me. In order to move from that lifestyle into the next lifestyle, we have to give up blame and belief in helplessness. Okay? Because most of us blame, have you noticed, a whole lot of the world lives, by the way, in this first kingdom of consciousness. Have you noticed? Okay? And so when anything happens, what's the first thing everybody wants to do? Who's to blame for this? Rather than just saying, how do we move out of this and create what we want? Different consciousness. Okay? So the next level of consciousness is I make life happen. I'm responsible. So I take responsibility for making my life happen. I start to learn processes and ways to make life happen. That's where a lot of people come to this kind of a church, is I'm frustrated, life has been dumping on me, how can I learn how to make my life better? And so we have tools and processes and that we teach people for how to make life better. Eventually, however, it gets really tiring to be the only one making your life happening. Have you noticed? And you begin to also be aware of there might be something greater than just me and my ego making my life happening. And so we move into a process called co-creating with the universe, but in order to move into that, we have to let go of control, which worked really well at the previous level. Okay? Eventually, when we get tired of that, when we want to expand, we don't get tired of it, but when we see that there's something even more, the 4th kingdom of consciousness is, so the 3rd kingdom is life is happening through me. The 4th kingdom of consciousness is life is happening as me. Or in another way of saying that is, I am happening as life. And the breakthrough for that is we have to let go of the belief in separation. In a way, there's no more I, there's just life is happening. Okay? And so at each of these levels, we have to let go of what worked. So as we look at the world today, we realize that the consciousness that created the world today is not the consciousness that will take us into a world that works for all. Because the consciousness that created the world today, by and large, is a consciousness of what works for me, not us, not a global. Yes? You guys were talking about the preacher at the World Parliament of Religions who said, "Are you with me?" All right. We have to transition our thinking and our existence and our processes into something that is greater than and different than what created where we are now. Einstein said that we cannot resolve the problem at the level of consciousness that created the problem. Last week I posted on Facebook that Seattle had joined a number of other cities in suing Monsanto, and for having polluted the area with the things that they do. And at first I posted it as this is what we call the Mender consciousness. That's what just trying to make things right. This is the Mender consciousness standing up to the Breaker consciousness. The Breaker consciousness is that which says it's all about me and what my good is, and screw you and screw the world. And it's a way of saying stop to the Mender consciousness. And it is. And then I went and read Troward later that day. If you want to rearrange your thinking, go read Troward some more. And what I got is that in a way it is, but in a way it's not. That suing, that fighting, that competition or combativeness is not the solution. Now, I don't know what exactly the solution is, but I know that a holistic approach, a us and them approach, is what's being called for in our world. When we start operating as a world of oneness, where we see Monsanto not as the enemy, but as just an expression of us, and we are one with Monsanto. There's a whole lot of people that are going to go, ugh, right now. Okay, so take a breath. And one of the things I remind people, I first learned this with the IRS. That the IRS is composed of individuals, human beings, who are God in form. And once I broke through that, you know what I found? I had a period of my life where I was spending some poor quality time talking a lot to the IRS and owed them some money. Do you know what I eventually found? I found a human being in the IRS who actually worked with me, who was a decent individual. Not like some of the others I had dealt with. But I had to drop my belief system about the IRS. We have to drop our belief systems about these monolithic corporations or whoever it is and start to recognize, wait a minute, if I believe that everyone is God in form, guess what? Even that person, organization, whatever it is God in form. I may not like what they're doing. I may completely disagree with how they're expressing. And I may look at this and say, you know what, they're running completely backwards to the universe, and yet still they're God in form, and I'm not separate from them. Deep teaching, right? It's a tough process. But we have to walk through that in order to create a world that works for everyone, because as long as I am separate from you, whatever you or them or they or whatever is, there's separation, there's the cause for dehumanization, and there's the opportunity to have conflict and to not care about them and to see them as less than, which are not values that we support. Okay? Are you with me? We are God in form. Each of us is God in form. Nudge your neighbor and say, you're God in form. You are God in form. If anybody missed it, I saw a couple people not communicating back row. You're all God in form, okay? Mary, I don't know if anybody looked at you, but you're God in form. I know you are. I know you know that. If we missed anybody else, you're God in form. You're the infinite presence. Our power no longer comes from working in the world of effects. What's the world of effects? It's all this stuff out here. I love it. The miners and cowboys in the old cowboy camps used to, when they first started seeing movies, the first still movies, occasionally would get up and shoot the screen to stop the villain. Okay? A friend of mine, Eddie Watkins, has a wonderful song that says, I'm trying to comb the mirror instead of my hair to straighten my hair out. Okay? That's dealing in the world of effects. It's not dealing in the world of cause. Consciousness, our consciousness, the collective consciousness, our individual consciousness is cause. Everything starts with what I believe. If I believe in a world of oneness and start to apply that belief, that's what starts to show up more and more in my life. If I believe in a world of separation and war and poverty and disease, that's what starts to show up more and more in my life. Okay? Consciousness is cause. So what can we do to work on our consciousness? If we choose to change the outer, we have to begin by changing the inner. And so we start changing ourselves. We start to move ourselves into greater and greater alignment with what is spiritual truth. And then we start to move ourselves into alignment with other people who share that point of view and start to collectively create a microcosm, a mastermind, whatever you want to call it, a collective consciousness that starts to share that. We have one of those here. It's us. See, as we are collectively saying yes to this kind of a world, as we're collectively saying, how can I shift my belief system into something new, into something different, into something that is more in alignment with a world that works for all? If I just sit with that question alone, how can I be more in alignment with that? I start to bring myself out of the old patterns that got us here and into new patterns. And I might take actions in the outer, but it's first I change the inner. First, I change the inner. And so what I want to invite us to do this week is to start to change our inner. And one of the ways that we can do that is to spend some time simply visualizing ourselves as whole, perfect, and complete. How many of you really, at your gut level, in every single moment and in every single situation, know that you are whole, perfect, and complete? Great. My hand's not up. I haven't mastered that yet. Okay? Little kids, they know. They know. And then we talk them out of it. Not here in this church, but life kind of does. Many of us got talked out of that. We knew it when we were born. We got talked out of it. So I want you to practice this week, first knowing your wholeness and your completeness at a deeper level. Visualize that. Spend some time just contemplating that. And then secondly, begin to see that as the truth of the whole world. Allow yourself to see, to visualize, to imagine a world that works in alignment with that principle. Because our consciousness is powerful. There are people who use visualizations to heal their body. There are people who use visualizations to shift relationships. There are people who use visualization and that power of consciousness to create jobs, to create financial prosperity, to create all sorts of wonderful things. Sports athletes use it to create, greater skill. We have that power. And you, and by you I'm talking about the person who's wearing your socks, sitting in your chair. You're not wearing socks and sitting in your chair. You have that power. And by all of us contributing to that, we create something different. So I'm going to invite you this week, it's the only spiritual practice I'm going to invite you to do this week, is to visualize a world that works for all. Whatever that looks like for you. Okay? Are you willing to take that on? Yeah. Great. Me too. I want to close with a quote from the Science of Mind textbook. Whatever is true of the universe as a whole must also be true of the individual as some part of the whole. Each individual is evolved from the universe as a self-conscious, thinking center of living spirit, and as such must, in nature and being, reproduce the universe. We reproduce the universe. What is it you want to reproduce? And so I call us to reproduce our highest and greatest, our very, very best. So let's move into prayer. I know that there is one infinite presence. And that presence is pure love, pure life, pure light, pure joy, pure wisdom, pure beauty. That infinite presence is all that there is. And because it is all that there is, we are one of it. We have to be one of it. There's nowhere to exist outside of an infinite presence. So we have to be one of that infinite presence. And if we are one of it, we are one of its nature. Every aspect of its nature. So we are one of the love. We are one of the life energy. We are one of the light. We are one of the wisdom. We are one of the power and creativity of this infinite presence. We are one of the abundant good. That is our true nature here and now, always has been, always will be. Whether we remember it or forget it, it still is our nature. And so I speak my word that today we are remembering that truth more fully, more deeply than ever before. That we are enacting that truth. We are living from that truth more positively, more powerfully than ever before. We are living in a life-affirming direction because that is the nature of spirit. And so we apply our love, we apply our compassion, we apply our life energy, we apply our beauty, we apply our joy, we apply our creativity to the expression of that in this world. And as we send it out, it must come back to us because that is the nature of how the world works, of how the universe works. That as I give, as I put out, it comes back to me. It may not come back from the same exact source or channel that I put it out to, but it has to come back to me because there is only that one life. And so I put it out and I watch the results come back. And I'm grateful for each of us who is playing in this consciousness, who is dancing in this consciousness, who is allowing ourselves to be expressions of this life, this light, this love in this world. I'm grateful for a world that works for everyone and is now being formed and created in human consciousness. I'm grateful for the transition into our next level of being as beings here on this planet. And so I release this word into a law that moves it into form and expression and experience here in this human form, right here, right now. And it does so because that is the nature of that law. That is the nature of that process of growth, is it is here to simply express that which is placed into it. And so it is done. And together we say, and so it is. Thank you.